Owls gawking right at the camera with their almost mechanical facial movements. Black cats unexpectedly passing, giving a jump scare. Sounds like horror tropes, right? But why and how did these innocent and least dangerous animals become part of our terrors? Have you ever given it a thought? Today, we'll be doing a video which partially answers these questions, or at least gives you a starting point for your investigations. So the protagonist of today's video is Lechuza. Wait, no hablo español? Sorry, this is our everyday neighborhood barn owl, whose face looks like a half-eaten apple. But in the folklore of the region on the Mexican-Texas border, this guy takes the terrifying form of La Lechuza, an owl witch, taking different shapes depending on the person you're hearing the lore from. The most popular of the shapes is one of a giant owl measuring 7 feet in height with the face of an old woman, replacing the half-eaten apple face of the barn owl. The folklores are not developed in a single day, but evolve over time, with bits and pieces getting added to them constantly. Exploration of the evolution of La Lechuza's legend is also the exploration of the Mesoamerican people, their colonization by the Spanish, and reminiscences of the past today. It's these aspects which complete the legend. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Origins of La Lechuza, a mystical transformation. What do we know about the Americas? For starters, it was discovered by Christopher Columbus and the less popular Amerigo Vespucci. Wait a moment. Discovery is the term used, right? So was there not a world before this discovery? Well, what we today call a discovery because of colonial baggage is nothing but the Europeans seeing land and encountering a thriving civilization for the first time, only to later conquer and destroy those civilizations, or in other words, to begin colonialism. Before the arrival of a foreign European culture, the natives had their own belief system and culture. The association of a soul with animals and birds was a common belief across Latin America. Owl was special among these spiritual connections because of its nocturnality and abundance. During colonialism and conquest, anything that was not part of the European knowledge system was deemed blasphemous and tried. Therefore, the native beliefs also got branded as pagan and devilish. But if you unravel the past, you'll never be able to find a single instance of one's cultures and beliefs being imposed, as they are, on the other. This is what we can see when we look at the legend of La Lechuza too. The spiritual connection with the Lechuza evolving into a folk horror which is indigenous to the location actually acts as resistance to the colonial imposition. The colonizers, after landing in the Americas, soon realized that they would never be able to gain loyalty from the natives as long as they practiced their traditional beliefs. The way they learned this was brutal. In the Spanish Inquisition that was established in 1478, the Inquisition barbarically killed anyone who practiced or professed non-Christian beliefs. Gradually, Catholicism started taking root in the Americas. Along with its rise, many of the old beliefs started taking negative shade. But still, even in a negative shade, the continuation of the beliefs meant that the history continued. When exploring what today is termed witchcraft, we see the adaptation and alteration of cultures and beliefs. Witchcraft often carries a negative connotation in the West, and plays a huge role in the making of the cultures of colonized countries look primitive. Say, for example, one of the first mentionings of witchcraft, or brujeria, in the colonized Americas was done by Nicolas Ramos, the European Archbishop of Santo Domingo. He had written about how the black brujos worshipped and communicated with the devil in the shape of a goat. But was it as terrifying as it was made to sound? I instead see a person either ignorant about the local practices, or who consciously wanted to make the native practices look like satanic cults. The binary was drawn, wherein Catholicism and European culture were the light and civilization, while the natives became the dark and primitive. But instead of getting completely sidelined, brujeria started acquiring a new form. The native rituals started mingling with other marginalized cultures belonging to both Europe and the African and Asian traditions brought by the enslaved. Even though the church disallowed the practices of it, some aspects of Catholicism were also adopted, and it became part of a new, larger Latino or Hispanic identity. We see its example in the legend of La Lechuza too. In Mayan culture, owl is seen as a totem associated with 2 months in the Mayan calendar. So if one is born in one of these 2 months, they're believed to share a unique and spiritual relation with the bird. If this is seen as a normal and positive symbolism, the others are today understood as a bit darker. In most of the indigenous belief systems of the Americas, owls are seen as messengers from gods of the underworld. This world is the realm of death, and so owls are often seen as harbingers of death. But I do not think this belief made the people see the bird as evil, as death is a necessary part of the life cycle. The change may have evolved during conquest, as death was no more a normal thing and was made violent and genocidal. So the fear of a violent death crept into the beliefs, and probably the messenger also became feared and hated. It is the combining of these beliefs associated with the bird and brujeria that led to the origins of the legend of La Lechuza. We already know a bit about La Lechuza, it being a woman. Even though there are different legends associated with the monster, all are common in one aspect, that the being is an incarnation of a woman who was wronged by society. We know about the Salem witch trials, whose victims were primarily of European descent. If witch hunting was so common in Europe, imagine the scale on which it would have happened amongst the indigenous communities, as their beliefs were already branded as evil. As La Lechuza is seen as immensely powerful and as the reincarnated version of a fellow human who was wronged, she can also be seen as a symbolic resistance. Disturbing characteristics and sightings of La Lechuza. By now, we know that there are different versions of the origin story of La Lechuza. Let's go through a few of them which will help you in providing a perspective to understand the sightings of her. The differences in the legends arise from how she was wronged. One of the most popular versions of the legends say that she was a bruja, whose son was killed by a drunkard. Others say that an entire village got together to kill her son. There's also a version which believes that it was she herself and not her son who the locals killed as part of witch hunting. In all these versions, what should be noted is that it is men who harmed her. This explains the popular belief that she preys on men, primarily drunkards. But that's not the only belief regarding her victims. There's another, which says that she abducts and harms children, particularly the unbaptized newborns. By bringing the element of baptism, we can clearly see the influence of Catholic beliefs in the evolution of the legend. A Christian influence can also be seen in the most evil versions of the myth, one in which La Lechuza is said to be a woman who has sold her soul to the devil so that she can roam around eternally terrorizing people with her unquenching vengeance. Lechuza, as we know, translates into barn owls, which are predominantly white or pale colored, but the monster variant has actually been reported in many cases to be black in color. The black colored monster is believed to be a giant. However, the descriptions of the monster's facial features have been varied. Some say it looks exactly like an owl, but huge, while others give varied amounts of human features to the behemoth. Some say that its eyes are that of a human, while others give a description of the being having an old woman's face. An altogether different description of her says that she's a witch who can transform into other animals, like goats and cats. When I first read about the legend, I totally pictured a hippogriff from Harry Potter, maybe arising from my admiration for the barn owls, which does not allow me to see it in a negative light. But sadly, the people who claim to have sighted or encountered it don't share my same enthusiasm towards La Lechuza. If you're from Texas and watching this video, there's a high chance that you can attest to or have more stories to tell about La Lechuza. This is not surprising, as Texas was once part of Mexico and shares historical roots with the other side of the border. Though it would be difficult to trace the first reported sighting of the bird, we have an abundance of stories and tales about her from the region, many of which are recent, considering that the legend probably originates in the pre-Columbus or at least in the beginnings of colonialism. One surely would be surprised to see it still going strong. Reddit has many narrations of La Lechuza sightings which are spooky. One of them, which is quite detailed, goes on about how La Lechuza, who was ugly, terrifying, and mammoth, was waiting to abduct a guy when he was a newborn, if not for his dog and his mother. But apart from personalized experiences, there have been collective reportings about sightings of the monster. In recent times, one of the first stories about a La Lechuza sighting was in Nuevo Laredo in Mexico. According to the version still in continuation, the locals planned to kill a La Lechuza, which was terrifying the town. They used a child as bait to lure it out, and when it tried to take the kid, they shot it, but only hit its claws. The spookiest part of the story is that when they went looking for the woman, whom they believed to be the bruja, they saw a lady with a bandaged leg. But the most popular case of collective sightings happened in Robstown, and the neighboring regions of Benquete and Alice in South Texas in 1975, and most of them had striking similarities too, in terms of description of the monster. Although it's become part of a running joke today, people from the era still claim that these stories are true. Modern depictions of La Lechuza, from folklore to pop culture. If we trace similarities between La Lechuza and myths across the world, we'll be surprised. For an example, look at the ancient Greek myth of Harpies, a bird with a woman's face who's also known to bring bad luck or evil upon those whom they visit. The Harpies might be a thing of the past, while La Lechuza still continues to occupy the lives of the people in the Americas. It speaks a lot about the cultures, that it's never constant and is constantly changing and incorporating elements from others. Well, as the beliefs and lives of the rural Americas are guided by the fear of beings like La Lechuza, one can see into the cultural reminiscences of a life which was heavily dependent on reverence and worshipping nature. The legend has gradually been adapted into pop culture. Have you listened to La Lechuza, the Owl Witch song, for instance? Tejano artist Maricela Barrera, a few months back, also paid her tributes to the Owl Witch in her San Antonio solo performance. If these are the direct references to the legend, one can see an indirect influence in many others. For instance, the La Lechuza song that featured in Dora the Explorer. Even though it's not a direct take at the monster, the song is named after the female owl and asks everyone to be quiet, the quietness being associated with the owl. How many of you are acquainted with Lekan Z. Kemp? She's a writer from Texas who explores Chicano culture through her stories. Her Omega Morales and the Legend of La Lechuza deals with the exploration of our monster. The legend has also made it to movies and shows, and lately, top documentaries and podcasts. It's slowly getting popularized as it gets introduced to a crowd outside Mesoamerica. Mystical powers and abilities of La Lechuza. We already know that La Lechuza is powerful and large in size, but what are some abilities that make her almost invincible? Let's see. Firstly, the powerful build she has. Her talons are so strong that she can clutch a fully grown human adult in them with ease. Further, in many versions, it's said that touching her, even if it's just the feathers, will bring instant death, and so does shooting her. Her ability to shapeshift is coupled with her skill to mimic babies crying to lure her predators to her. According to some, La Lechuza can also bring storms with her, being able to control the climate. She sounds undefeatable, right? Well, you can still be saved from her attacks. Salt is known to possess mystical power to repel the monster. If you're not armed with salt, cursing and swearing at her can also make her go away. But in some legends, it has the opposite effect, maddening the Owl Witch. There are a few more complicated weapons to save you. One is tying 7 knots on a rope and hanging it at the door as a mark of respect toward the bird. The other one is the prayer Magnificat from St. Luke's Gospel. Wait, don't just memorize the original prayer, but also in reverse and in Spanish. Finally, be careful before taking a solitary walk at night in the neighborhood. Who knows if she's waiting for you? Marvelous conclusion. It was Gabriel Garcia Marquez who said during his Nobel Prize-winning speech that Latin America's reality is still incomprehensible for the West. Owing to this, his literary style was termed as magical realism. According to him, what the outsiders have named as magical is basically everyday life for them. La Lechuza, still continuing to be part of the local belief, shows the hollowness of Western minds, who see it as a symbol of backwardness and primitiveness. The fears and fascinations are part of the culture. Let's try to see it as that, as violence inflicted by humans on the continent and culture is much larger and more incomprehensible than the fear of the unknown or the supernatural. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.